everyone. We're back from MediFuture, coming to you live. My name is Kate Warnock, and I'm the GuideWell social media manager. I have with us today Peter Gilmore. He's partner with Oliver Wyman Group. Welcome to the GuideWell Insight Lounge, Peter.
It's great to be here with you.
We're delighted to have you. So Peter has a lot of experience with the pharmacy industry, and I thought that we would kind of have a few questions for you around that.
Sure.
So Peter, obviously something that's just huge in the news is the Ebola virus and the impact it's had on the African nation. There's lots of scares around folks traveling that way, and I think the average American consumer is very worried about something that's taking place over in Africa.
Sure.
The reality is, though, that as drug therapies are being developed, we're not always focused on those small, diseases that are coming out of exotic locations. I think drug companies are typically focused on things like heart therapies or cancer treatments. So
That's true.
I think that there might be a little bit of a disconnect, though, from the average consumer saying, well, where's the drug, where's the medicine to take care of something like Ebola?
Right.
And maybe not understand the years that it takes for drugs to be developed, the funding that has to go into that. Do you see moving forward that the consumer market might exert more pressure on how drug therapies are created? And if so, how would that come into play?
Yeah, no, I think so. So first on the Ebola crisis, it is a horrible crisis and one that has just sort of emerged basically from nowhere and has caused a lot of concern, as you've mentioned. And in the pharmaceutical industry, certainly we've heard a cry from consumers, obviously in the United States, but also in the countries that are affected and other parts of the world, for access to drug therapies. And I think that the dilemma is this one that you pointed out, the fact that drugs really do have a long lead time. There are regulatory hurdles that have to be met, and we have to understand how drugs work fundamentally, the underlying clinical data to make sure that they're both safe and effective for patients. And that's a fairly long time horizon, right? We don't want to put in the hands and in the systems of our patients drugs that aren't fully tested. And so they are being worked on in Ebola. But as crises emerge, we learn from how diseases manifest and so forth, and that drives further drug development. So I think we will see the pharmaceutical industry eventually addressing a crisis like Ebola.
I saw something recently that I believe it was the FDA was actually looking to maybe loosen some of the restrictions around how drugs are able to come to market. Do you see that might be a trend that will have, will we see more of that loosening, or, will we continue to be as regulated as you're used to seeing?
I think in certain conditions, like a emergent medical condition that turns into a population-based crisis, certainly we could see some relaxing of the regulatory restrictions. But in most of the major core diseases where the pharmaceutical and biotechnology industries are focused today, like oncology, cardiovascular care, gastrointestinal disease, I actually think we're going to see the opposite. I think there's a higher bar now from a regulatory perspective in terms of what we would want our drug therapies to be able to produce in terms of efficacy and safety.
Okay.
And more, and this relates back to Health Market 2.0, there's an expectation beyond just efficacy and safety. There's the health economic benefit.
Sure.
So what is the drug delivering in terms of cost versus outcomes? What are the quality of those outcomes? That's where I see Health Market 2.0, the big theme that we've been talking about here at MediFuture, really shaping drug development into the future. It's that last hurdle on health economics.
Well, it's a perfect lead into our next question.
Yeah.
We know that in the healthcare economy, drug spending itself is a major driver of the spending that happens in the health industry.
Yes.
Yet something like a formulary is considered a dirty word. So if we try to select drugs and put them on a list that we ask network physicians to prescribe from just to control costs, there's a disconnect with the consumer who feels like they don't have the best access to the best drug for them.
Right.
How is it that we strike the right balance then moving forward between payers, providers, government agencies to offer consumers the treatments that they want, yet still rein in the costs that we know are typically associated with drug therapies?
Well, that indeed is the $10 billion plus $10 trillion question, right? How do we strike that balance? Because you're right. Consumers want access. Providers, frankly, want the freedom and flexibility to prescribe the right medication to the right patient. Payers want to fully understand the total cost related to prescribing the drug therapy, and if there are alternatives that are cost effective, that has delivered the same level of outcomes but at a lower cost. So striking that balance, we know, is quite challenging and complex. I think where we're going to see some big changes is from payers and providers and patients, for that matter, or consumers, demanding more of pharmaceutical companies when it comes to something called real-world evidence. So pharmaceutical companies are fantastic at generating data, right? They have to, just from a regulatory perspective, just like what we were talking about. But more and more, we're going to see a demand for data that affirms that in a real-world setting, as patients move through their lives, that we're seeing the same types of clinical benefits, efficacy, safety, and we're getting value from drug therapies. And I think a lot of the new technologies and new approaches to care delivery that we're seeing here at MediFuture, that are all part of Market 2.0, I think help to reemphasize this concept of real world, right? That medicine isn't just done in a laboratory and in a sterile environment where we're observing how new technologies like drug therapy, how they perform under the most ideal circumstances. They have to perform in the real world. And so I think that balance between the payer, provider, the pharma manufacturer, the consumer or patient is all going to come from better understanding, that is better data that reflects real world conditions. I think then it will become clear which drug therapies are cost effective and where they should be used and in which types of patients.
I would think that would be a positive market force. Who wouldn't want to see that? And honestly, obviously best for the drug makers themselves.
That's right. To be able to prove that your drug therapy really is the best. It's the most cost effective and delivers the best outcomes.
So we've been here at MediFuture for a good half day so far, and I'm wondering, have you had any major aha moments from the Mavericks that we have here in attendance, and so much to learn? What have you taken away so far?
What I think is most interesting is when you look at some of the incumbent players in the healthcare value chain, some of the large provider networks that are here, integrated delivery networks, hospital chains, et cetera, and then the payer organizations. Those that are here, I believe they are here because they are disruptors. They are innovators, even though they're incumbents. And I work with a group of companies, the big pharma, the pharmaceutical industry, which also is among the incumbents. What I'm impressed from what I see here at MediFuture is the willingness to experiment, the willingness to introduce, whether it's new technologies or again, new approaches to care delivery, to experiment, to find a better way. And so some of the work I'm trying to do is to get pharmaceutical companies as incumbents to start to experiment. There are new and different and better ways to collect, say, the real world evidence that we've been speaking about, or to achieve different types of outcomes that are just as important to patients. So that's really my aha, is the braveness of some of the incumbents that are here today.
Well, that's a great point. We haven't really heard too much about the healthcare side of being the ones with the courage. I think that so much of the emphasis is on the consumer, and obviously moving forward, healthcare market 2.0, we do need to empower our consumers and obviously know the right questions to ask, so whether it's the right drug therapy for them or just being more educated on the drug treatments that they should be using. So you've had some terrific responses for us today, Peter Gilmore. I really appreciate your time with us here in the GuideWell Insights Lounge, and look forward to hearing more from you in the future.
Thank you.
All right, thanks so much.